For centuries, the story of writing has followed a simple arc. Civilization begins in Mesopotamia. Hieroglyphs rise in Egypt. The alphabet appears much later, in Canaan, or perhaps with the early Israelites. And the Bible emerged from a world where literacy was rare, sacred, and tightly controlled. But in the last 2 decades, and especially with discoveries now reaching public attention, archaeologists uncovered inscriptions in ancient Egypt that should not exist. They are 3,800 years old, written by Semitic-speaking workers, carved in Egyptian desert outposts, using a script that is neither hieroglyphic nor cuneiform, and yet unmistakably alphabetic. These inscriptions, found at Wadi el-Hol, Sarabit el-Qadim, and other Middle Kingdom sites, represent the earliest alphabet ever discovered. Older than Phoenician, older than Hebrew, older than anything the Bible world was supposed to have. And they raise a question that echoes across archaeology, linguistics, and theology. If the alphabet existed centuries before Moses, who was writing in Egypt? And what does that mean for the origins of the biblical texts? This is the story of the script that shouldn't exist, and how it is reshaping the earliest chapters of biblical history. The discovery that shocked archaeology. A strange script carved into the desert cliffs. In the late 1990s, Egyptologists John and Deborah Darnell were surveying a remote desert road in central Egypt, a military route used during the Middle Kingdom around 1800 BCE. At a site called Wadi el-Hol, they found something no one expected. 2 long inscriptions carved into limestone cliffs. At first glance, they looked like crude hieroglyphs, but the shapes were wrong. A stick figure with raised arms, a snake-like curve, a simplified ox head, a cross-shaped mark, a fish-like symbol. These were not Egyptian hieroglyphs. They were not Mesopotamian cuneiform. They were something else entirely. When linguists analyzed them, they realized the truth. This was the earliest alphabetic writing ever discovered, dated to around 1800 BCE, nearly 4,000 years old. Older than the Phoenician alphabet by 600 years. Older than the earliest Hebrew inscriptions by nearly a millennium. The alphabet did not begin in Canaan. It began in Egypt, carved by Semitic workers living under Egyptian rule. The invention of the alphabet. A writing system built by the uneducated. Before this discovery, writing belonged to elites. Egyptian scribes trained for years. Mesopotamian scribes mastering hundreds of signs. Priests, administrators, and royal officials. But the inscriptions at Wadi el-Hol were different. They were simple, phonetic, based on the acrophonic principle, using a picture to represent the first sound of a word. For example, an ox head, alp, the sound A. A house, bait, the sound B. A water wave, mayim, the sound M. This is the foundation of the alphabet we use today, and it was invented not by scholars, but by Semitic laborers working in Egypt. These workers spoke early Northwest Semitic, the linguistic ancestor of Hebrew, Aramaic, Phoenician, Moabite, Ammonite. They took Egyptian hieroglyphs and repurposed them into a simple, flexible writing system. A writing system anyone could learn. A writing system that would eventually shape the biblical world. Sarabit el-Qadim, the mine of words, where slaves carved the first alphabet. The next major discovery came from Sarabit el-Qadim, a turquoise mining site in the Sinai Peninsula. For decades, archaeologists found strange inscriptions there, scratched into stone by Semitic-speaking workers. But only after the Wadi el-Hol discovery did scholars realize what they were. Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions, the earliest alphabetic script, dated between 1850 and 1550 BCE. These inscriptions include personal names, dedicatory phrases, religious references, work records. One inscription famously reads, "To Balat, Lady of Turquoise." This is a Semitic goddess, not Egyptian, meaning the workers brought their own language, their own religion, and their own writing system into Egyptian territory. These inscriptions prove Semitic workers were literate centuries earlier than once believed. The alphabet was created in an Egyptian context. The script spread from Egypt into Canaan. And this is where the biblical questions begin. The biblical connection. The alphabet existed before Moses, so who was writing? Traditional biblical chronology places Moses around 1250 to 1400 BCE, depending on interpretation. But the earliest alphabetic inscriptions date to 1800 BCE, centuries earlier. This raises several questions. 1. Could early Israelites have encountered the alphabet in Egypt? 2. Could parts of early biblical tradition have been written earlier than assumed? 3. Does this challenge the idea that writing was rare in early Israel? 4. Does this support the idea of Semitic laborers in Egypt? 5. Does this change the timeline of literacy in the ancient Near East? The alphabet was not a late invention. It was an early one, and it spread rapidly. The script that shouldn't exist. A linguistic explosion with no precursor. One of the most mysterious aspects of the early alphabet is this. It appears suddenly, fully formed, with no earlier developmental stages. Hieroglyphs evolved over centuries. Cuneiform evolved over centuries. But the alphabet? It appears in the desert, carved by workers, not scribes, with no clear prototype. This has led scholars to propose a moment of creative genius by Semitic workers, a deliberate simplification of hieroglyphs, a cultural need for a writing system accessible to non-elites. The alphabet was a revolution, not an evolution. And revolutions leave questions. What the inscriptions actually say. Names, prayers, dedications, and hints of a Semitic identity. The inscriptions include personal names like Belit, Bede, Hagar, Ikib, references to Semitic deities, work records, dedicatory offerings, short phrases like beloved, gift, mine, mountain. Some names resemble later biblical names. Ikib, Jacob, Bede, Obed, Bult, Balat, feminine form of Baal. These are not Israelites, but they are part of the same linguistic family. The inscriptions show Semitic workers were present in Egypt. They used an alphabet. They had their own religious traditions. They were capable of writing centuries before the biblical period. This did not prove the Exodus, but it proves the cultural setting was plausible. How this rewrites biblical history. The Bible did not emerge from an illiterate world. For decades, scholars argued early Israel was mostly illiterate. Writing was rare before the monarchy. The alphabet arrived late. Biblical texts were written centuries after the events they describe, but the 3,800-year-old inscriptions challenge this. They show 1. Semitic literacy existed in Egypt centuries earlier. 2. The alphabet was designed for ordinary people. 3. Early Israelite literacy is more plausible than previously believed. 4. Biblical traditions could have been written earlier than assumed. The origins of the Hebrew alphabet trace back to Egypt. This is not religious apologetics. It is archaeology. The scholarly consensus. What experts agree on and what remains debated. Widely accepted facts. The earliest alphabetic inscriptions date to circa 1800 BCE. They were created by Semitic-speaking workers in Egypt. They represent the ancestor of all alphabetic scripts. They predate the earliest Hebrew writing by centuries. They reshape our understanding of literacy in the ancient Near East. Debated questions. Were the inventors Proto-Israelites? No direct evidence, but they were Semitic. Did early Israelites inherit this script? Likely, but not provable. Does this support the Exodus narrative? It supports the cultural plausibility, not the event itself. Could early biblical material have been written earlier? Possible, but not proven. The inscriptions do not confirm the Bible. They do not contradict it. They illuminate the world behind it. For centuries, the alphabet was thought to be a gift from the Phoenicians, a late invention that arrived long after the age of the patriarchs. But the desert cliffs of Egypt tell a different story. A story of Semitic workers carving their language into stone. A story of writing system born not in palaces, but in minds. A story of letters that would one day shape the Hebrew Bible, Greek philosophy, Roman law, and the modern world. The alphabet did not begin in Canaan. It began in Egypt, in the hands of people history forgot. People who are not scribes, not priests, not kings. People who needed a way to write their own words and invented a system simple enough for anyone to learn. A system that would outlive empires. A system that would carry the stories of prophets, poets, and revolutionaries. A system that would become the foundation of nearly every written language on Earth. The 3,800-year-old inscriptions do not rewrite the Bible. They rewrite the world in which the Bible was born, and they remind us of a profound truth. Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with kings, but with workers carving impossible words into stone. Stay blessed and stay curious.